Hello and welcome. I'm Sophia, and let's start with the question. Did anyone watch Star Wars growing up? Well, do you guys remember that famous scene where Darth Vader goes to Luke, says, "Luke, I'm your father"? Well, what if I can tell you that didn't happen at all? What if instead he goes, "No, I'm your father"? Well, that would be called a Mandela effect. A Mandela effect shows how our memories can be wrong even though we believe it is true and people agree with us. So we as a community, we trust our memories, whether it's recalling a childhood cartoon or a famous movie quote or a lyric from a song. Well, we feel confident that it's real. What if it's not, though? I first learned about the Mandela effect a few years ago when I was studying psychology in high school, and since then I have done tons of research based on the Mandela effect, learning more about it. First, let's talk about the discovery of the Mandela effect. The Mandela effect was first discovered by Fiona Brome. She was the first person to discover this because she thought Nelson Mandela had been murdered in prison. However, he was not murdered in prison, even though she had believed that there had been riots on his behalf of his death. So she believed that it had been real, and she had discovered this with coworkers who had told her that that had never even happened. So with this interest of false memories, she created a website where people could send in Mandela effects of things they had thought had happened in their childhood, however, never happened at all. So now that we've learned the discovery and why it's called the Mandela effect, let's transition into learning why our brain creates these false memories. So first we need to think about it. Memory is reconstructive. It doesn't record like cameras. So according to Cleveland Clinic, this can lead to false memories. Our brain isn't always going to be correct because instead they like to fill in the gaps with things that make sense to them. Like a good example would be the Monopoly Man, where people think he's wearing the monocle. And instead he's not. But we think because he's a big billionaire that he would be wearing those fancy little glasses. However, he's not wearing those at all. Another big factor would be the internet. The internet influences us and reinforces these false memories. However, they're not real. You'll see tons of memes based on reinforcing these fake things that everyone thinks real, but they're really not. So these psychological facts are pretty interesting, right? Yep. So let's dive into some examples that you may not know of. Two famous examples would be Fruit of the Loom. There is no cornucopia. Not at all. Yeah, I know. There's no cornucopia. Some people think there's cornucopia and then the fruit's coming out of the cornucopia. However, it's just a fruit. Brintica 2023 even confirms this. Second most famous thing is Bernstein Bears, though many remembers it as Bernstein, which is just not true. So, those examples are pretty wild, right? Now that we've seen the Mandela effect and why it happens, let's wrap things up. So, the Mandela effect shows that memory isn't as reliable as we may think it is, and how shared false memories can spread. Next time you remember something, try to ask yourself, did that really happen, or is it just a glitch in the matrix? Okay, and keep questioning your memories. They may not be as real as you believe.
We never made it to 40 minutes.